Imagine the base sirens just start wailing. You hear that 3 to 5 minute wavering tone,
Right.
and suddenly you smell something sweet and pungent in the air.
A terrifying scenario.
Exactly. So your immediate instinct drilled into you since basic training is to grab your standard issue gas mask and lock it down.
Which makes sense on paper.
It does. But if you do that in this specific scenario, you might just guarantee your own death. And not just yours, but the deaths of every single airman you lead.
It is a literal fatal error.
Welcome to the Blue Suit Files, where today we are executing a systematic scan of the Airman Development and Testing Chart.
We are getting into the absolute architecture of your responsibilities.
Yes, specifically targeting the structural expectations placed upon you as an operational leader, as a technical sergeant.
Because the stakes at that level are absolute.
So for this deep dive, we are analyzing the study sections document to determine the exact cognitive parameters required for Air Force Handbook 1, Chapter 17.
Chapter 17, which dictates emergency management.
Right. The objective here is clinical and precise. We must identify the architecture of your responsibilities.
And upon scanning the matrix, the result is completely uniform.
It is. Across all sections of Chapter 17, from Section 17A all the way through 17F, the required level of comprehension for a TSGT is strictly designated as Level B.
Level B. And to understand your operational mandate, we really must define Level B directly from the source text.
Let's break that down. What does the text say?
The regulatory framework defines Level B, or understanding, as constructing meaning from different types of functions.
Constructing meaning.
Exactly. Whether it's written or graphic messages, or activities like interpreting, exemplifying, classifying, summarize, inferring, comparing, or explaining.
That's a lot of active verbs.
It is. We must be absolutely clear about what this means for you on the ground. This is not a request for you to simply memorize a list of facts.
You're right, or just recall definitions from a table.
Because that is Level A comprehension. And listen to me, Level A will not save your personnel during a biological attack.
You can't just recite a manual to a nerve agent.
Precisely. Level B requires you to comprehend the architecture of survival. You must interpret the regulatory framework, classify the incoming threats, and infer the secondary hazards.
Because if you fail to construct meaning from those directives,
A failure there will result in catastrophic operational failure. You are not just wearing the gear, you are managing the system that dictates when and why the gear is worn.
so we must establish the overarching purpose of this system. The primary mission of the Department of the Air Force Emergency Management Program is designed entirely around great power competition.
That is the big picture.
The text explicitly states that the ability to carry out this mission depends directly on the continuance of the mission in the face of adversity.
Continuance, not pausing, not stopping.
Right. This is not about passive defense. The system is engineered to absorb impact, sustain operations, and restore operational capability in an all-hazards threat environment.
At installations worldwide,
Exactly. The stated goal is saving lives and minimizing the degradation of resources. Every regulation, every alarm tone, every piece of protective equipment, it all serves this singular strategic objective.
keeping the base operational so it can project power.
But we need to examine what the doctrine actually means by adversity, right?
We do, because the clinical stakes are explicitly defined in the text as natural and man-made disasters, terrorist use of weapons of mass destruction, and hostile attacks.
Those are extreme parameters.
The environment we are discussing is actively, lethally hostile. Adversity in this context is not a bureaucratic hurdle. It's not a budget shortfall.
Or a delayed shipment.
No. It is a typhoon tearing apart your flight line. It is a nerve agent settling over your dormitories.
Wow.
It is a lethal event designed to permanently halt your operations.
So the overarching goal of saving lives and restoring capability is really the only metric of success.
It is the only metric when an installation is targeted by a weapon of mass destruction. If you fail to understand the doctrine, the installation just ceases to function as a military asset.
To structure this defense, the text breaks down the emergency management framework into 5 distinct sequential mission areas.
The architecture of survival.
Right. We must map out this architecture. First is prevention.
And the text defines this as actions taken to avoid an incident or intervene to stop an incident from occurring.
Protecting lives and property before it happens.
Exactly.
Second is protection. This involves providing the capabilities necessary to defend the installation against all threats and hazards.
Right, the physical and systemic defenses.
Third is response. This covers the activities that address the short-term, direct effects of an incident.
including immediate actions to save lives and limit unfavorable outcomes.
Fourth is recovery, the execution of restoration plans for impacted communities and the reconstitution of government operations.
Getting back on your feet.
And finally, the fifth area is mitigation.
Which is defined as the activities designed to reduce or eliminate risks or lessen the actual or potential effects of an incident.
And the text notes this can be implemented prior to, during, or after an incident.
Look at the structural progression of those 5 areas. I mean, they represent a literal timeline of survival.
Walk me through that timeline.
Well, prevention is intelligence and security stopping the bomber at the gate.
Makes sense.
Protection is the concrete barrier and the bunker that absorbed the blast if prevention fails.
Okay, so then response.
Response is the immediate chaotic triage when the bunker is breached.
And recovery is putting it all back together.
Recovery is the methodical process of making the base lethal again. And mitigation is the continuous feedback loop of learning from the blood spilled to build a better bunker tomorrow.
That's a stark way to put it.
It is the grim reality of the doctrine. These 5 areas are the structural foundation, but, they require human execution.
Right. The doctrine is useless without an organizational apparatus to enforce it.
Absolutely useless.
So that brings us directly to the structural apparatus, the disaster response force, or the DRF.
The human element.
The text defines specific organizational offices and responders that manage and conduct response operations. And as a TSGT, Level B comprehension dictates you must understand the exact functional distinction between these entities.
You have to know who does what and when.
When an incident occurs, the system activates the Emergency Communications Center, or the ECC.
Right.
The PAS dictates the ECC is a 24-hour-a-day, 7 days a week operation. It incorporates the core functions of fire and emergency services, security forces, and medical dispatch.
Functionally, the ECC operates as the central nervous system for the installation.
The central node.
Exactly. It is the primary node for alarm monitoring and responder reachback capability. All data regarding a hazard flows into the ECC, and all immediate tactical dispatches flow out of it.
But the ECC is just the sensory organ of the base, right? It does not execute the physical response.
No, it doesn't. The physical response begins with the incident commander.
And the text dictates the incident commander is responsible for all incident activities.
All of them. This includes developing strategies and tactics and ordering and releasing resources.
So they possess overall authority for managing incident operations at the site.
The incident commander is the absolute tactical authority in the hot zone.
Give me an example of how that looks.
Well, if a C-17 crashes on the runway and catches fire, the incident commander owns that crash site. They dictate where the hoses go, where the cordon is set, and who is allowed inside.
They are the ultimate authority on that specific patch of concrete.
Yes.
Following the incident commander, the regulatory framework introduces 2 distinct categories of personnel: first responders and emergency responders.
This is a critical distinction.
Right. The text defines first responders as fire and emergency services, medical, and security forces.
Okay.
But emergency responders are defined as chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear defense specialists, explosive ordnance disposal personnel, physicians, and mortuary affairs personnel. When you examine this list, the categorization seems almost arbitrary at first glance. Why is a medic a first responder, but a physician is an emergency responder?
It seems strange until you look at the sequence.
So what is the functional distinction between these 2 groups within the doctrine?
The distinction is sequential and highly clinical. First responders are tasked by the text to immediately engage in activities to save lives, stabilize the incident, and prevent further property damage.
Immediate stabilization.
Exactly. Their function is instantaneous. They are the blunt instruments used to stop the immediate hemorrhaging of the installation.
Stop the bleeding, put out the fire.
Yes, but emergency responders are explicitly defined as the follow-on response elements.
Follow on?
They deploy after the first responders to expand the incident commander's capabilities.
Okay, that makes the medic versus physician difference clear.
You send the first responders to put out the fire and drag the casualties away from the flames. You send the emergency responders, such as mortuary affairs, to process the fatalities.
Or CBRN specialists to identify the specific nerve agent that caused the crash.
Exactly. First responders stabilize. Emergency responders manage the complex, lethal fallout that requires specialized processing.
Looking closely at the text, though, I must point out a deliberate, almost frustrating vagueness regarding these personnel structures.
Vagueness in military doctrine is always interesting.
It is. When defining first responders, the text lists the expected entities, but includes the phrase, other personnel who immediately engage.
Right.
And later, when defining specialized and support teams, the text lists examples like damage assessment and spill response, but concludes the list with the single word others.
Just other.
From a systemic standpoint, relying on others seems to invite chaos. I mean, who exactly are these other personnel? Am I supposed to simply guess who is qualified to immediately engage in the middle of a catastrophic disaster?
I know it sounds chaotic, but that vagueness is not a flaw in the writing. It is a necessary operational contingency built into the doctrine.
How so?
The text cannot account for every specific catastrophic variable or casualty rate. If a missile strike decimates your firehouse, your designated first responders are gone.
Oh, I see.
The exact roster of other personnel becomes highly adaptable based on who survives the initial impact and what secondary skills are immediately available on the flight line.
So whoever is left standing has to step up.
Exactly. However, while the personnel roster is flexible, the function of those personnel immediate stabilization is absolute.
The system requires extreme flexibility in who performs the task, but demands rigid adherence to the operational purpose of the task.
You construct meaning from the situation, which is level B comprehension at its core.
Moving up the structural hierarchy, we must establish the division of command during a crisis.
The strategic level.
Right. The system cannot rely solely on the tactical elements. It requires a strategic oversight apparatus.
And the text defines two distinct nodes for this.
The Emergency Operations Center, or EOC, and the Crisis Action Team, or CTAT.
Let's define them.
The EOC is defined as the installation's critical function to address imminent or realized threats and coordinate support to the incident command and on-scene personnel.
Support is the key word there.
And the CIT is defined as the top echelon of installation mission continuation and sustainment, consisting of senior officers across the A staff.
So we have two separate command nodes operating simultaneously during a disaster.
Here is the critical distinction you must understand, because confusing these two nodes leads to strategic failure.
The text contains a highly specific note regarding the Crisis Action Team. It states, and listen closely, the CIT is intended to focus on mission continuation and sustainment, and not the management of the incident.
Not the management of the incident. That is profound separation of duties.
The incident commander fights the fire. The EOC coordinates the bulldozers and extra foam to support the incident commander.
And the CIT?
The CIT exists solely to ensure that the installation's primary mission-launching bomber aircraft, directing satellite constellations, maintaining strategic nuclear deterrence, does not stop because of the fire.
So the CIT looks outward at the war.
While the EOC looks inward at the disaster.
That is a vital architectural boundary. If you blur the lines of these responsibilities, the system collapses.
It completely breaks down.
If the senior officers on the crisis action team start micromanaging the placement of fire hoses on the runway, they are no longer managing the installation's strategic output.
The overarching mission fails because senior leadership allowed a localized tactical emergency to consume their attention.
The text explicitly engineers the EOC to absorb the logistical burden of the disaster so the CIT can keep the base fighting.
Precisely. The EOC isolates the friction of the disaster. The CIT ensures the adversary does not capitalize on that friction.
We will now transition to the actual threats that activate this entire framework.
The real grim stuff.
We must examine sections 17b and 17e, addressing the taxonomy of hazards and mishaps. The doctrine categorizes hazards into 3 rigid classifications, and we must understand the parameters of each.
3 classifications.
First are natural disasters. The text defines these as non-routine events causing severe damage, including typhoons, tsunamis, earthquakes, and floods.
Mother Nature, basically.
Second are technological hazards. These are man-made events caused by a malfunction in a technological structure or human error in controlling the technology.
Industrial accidents.
The text provides examples such as hazardous material releases or nuclear power plant failures.
Right.
Third are man-made hazards. These are non-routine events that exceed the local capacity to respond, such as acts of terrorism, active shooters, or biological and chemical threats.
We must execute a clinical analysis of that third category, specifically the chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threat matrix detailed in 17b.
The CBRN threats.
These are not accidents. They are asymmetric measures of intent designed to cause adverse effects through deliberate release.
Let us analyze the chemical agent first.
The text defines this as a substance intended to kill, seriously injure, or incapacitate, mainly through physiological effects.
And the doctrine categorizes them strictly by how they destroy the human body, right?
Yes. Lung-damaging agents, blister agents, blood agents, and nerve agents.
And what's the primary threat to the base?
The text explicitly notes that due to their persistent nature, nerve and blister agents pose a primary threat to air bases.
Because they linger.
Exactly. They are designed to contaminate the concrete, the aircraft, and the personnel for extended periods, completely denying you the ability to operate.
The biological threat introduces an entirely different operational timeline, doesn't it? And a massive psychological burden.
The psychological toll is immense.
The text categorizes biological agents as viruses, bacteria, fungi, and toxins cultured from living organisms. They are disseminated as liquid droplets, aerosols, or dry powders.
But unlike a missile strike or a chemical cloud, a biological attack does not trigger an immediate kinetic signature.
There's no explosion to warn you.
No. The terrifying reality of the biological hazard is explicitly stated in the text. Symptoms of biological attacks may not be experienced immediately after contact.
The incubation period.
Yes. Each biological agent possesses a specific incubation period before the onset of infection. A chemical attack is immediate, visible, and localized. A biological attack is silent and expansive.
Because of the incubation period, your personnel will likely report to their shifts, eat in the dining facility, and interact across the installation before the first symptom even manifests.
The doctrine acknowledges that an adversary using a biological weapon is effectively turning your own personnel into vectors.
Distributing the hazard throughout your command structure before you even recognize an attack has occurred.
Which is an absolute nightmare for an incident commander.
Regarding radiological and nuclear hazards, the text divides radiation into two distinct forms based on their interaction with matter.
Let's go through them.
First is non-ionizing radiation. The text uses microwaves as an example, stating that this form generally produces heat when it interacts with the body.
Okay.
Second is ionizing radiation. The text states this form has sufficient energy to produce ions when interacting with matter, including the human body.
The text specifies the grim mechanics of ionizing radiation. It causes harmful effects by altering or destroying cell processes and structures essential for normal functioning.
It breaks you down at the cellular level.
It literally shreds the biological architecture of your personnel.
And furthermore, in the event of a nuclear detonation, you are facing a multi-tiered destructive event.
It's not just the blast.
Right. The primary concerns listed in the doctrine are blast and shock, thermal radiation or heat, ionizing radiation, and ballistic debris. The physical destruction is absolute.
However, the text issues a critical secondary warning here.
That's it.
Nuclear blasts pose an electromagnetic pulse hazard, or EMP.
An EMP.
Yes. An EMP is capable of causing widespread communications and electrical failures. It will instantaneously blind your command and control infrastructure.
Severing the ECC, the EOC, and the CCAT from the tactical operators.
You are fighting in the dark.
Within this hazard taxonomy, we must address a specific regulatory distinction that fundamentally alters your response protocols.
This is where understanding the definitions is life or death.
The text differentiates between toxic industrial chemicals and toxic industrial materials.
TIC versus DIM.
A toxic industrial chemical, or TIC, is defined as a chemical developed or manufactured for use in industrial operations.
Right.
A toxic industrial material, or TIM, is a generic term for toxic, chemical, biological, or radioactive substances in solid, liquid, aerosolized, or gaseous form used for industrial, commercial, or domestic purposes.
On paper, they sound nearly identical. Both are industrial hazards.
They are not identical, and this distinction is where Level B comprehension transitions from an academic exercise into a matter of literal life or death.
We must look at the specific warning the text issues regarding toxic industrial materials.
The TIMs.
The doctrine explicitly states that most toxic industrial materials present a vapor or inhalation hazard and may reduce the oxygen concentration below that required to support life.
Wait, let me look at this structural requirement again.
Read it carefully.
The text explicitly states that standard military protective masks, ensembles, and collective protection filters are not designed to provide protection from toxic industrial materials.
They are not designed for it.
If a local commercial chemical plant ruptures, a technological hazard, and a toxic plume drifts over the installation, My instinct as a leader would be to order everyone into their standard combat gas masks.
which is what you've been trained to do for a chemical agent.
But if I treat a TIM like a chemical warfare agent, I am ordering my personnel to strap on a filter that does not supply oxygen against a vapor hazard.
Precisely. If you rely on your standard issue chemical mask during a toxic industrial material release, you will suffocate.
The mask filters out specific warfare agents.
It does not generate oxygen in an oxygen-depleted environment.
You become the architect of their suffocation.
The text mandates that the most important action in this specific scenario is to immediately evacuate.
Get away from the plume.
If evacuation is impractical, the doctrine dictates you must implement shelter-in-place procedures, physically sealing the environment.
A failure to construct meaning from the difference between a warfare agent and an industrial material guarantees a fatal outcome for your team.
That is the exact definition of Level B comprehension. You have to interpret the hazard to apply the correct defense mechanism.
Transitioning from external threats to internal hazards, Section 17E details the Department of the Air Force Mishap Prevention Program.
Mishaps, the internal threat.
The system defines a mishap as an unplanned occurrence resulting in occupational illnesses, death, injury, or damage to Department of Defense property.
So we've talked about surviving a chemical attack or a typhoon. But what happens when the threat isn't a missile, but a tired airman making a mistake with heavy machinery on the flight line?
The doctrine quantifies human error and structural damage into 4 rigid metrics, prioritizing financial loss and physical disability.
These classifications are strictly audited. Let's start at the top.
A Class A mishap. This consists of costs totaling $2.5 million or more, the destruction of a DoD aircraft, a fatality, or a permanent total disability.
This is the catastrophic threshold.
A Class B mishap involves costs between $600,000 and $2.5 million, a permanent partial disability, or the inpatient hospitalization of 3 or more personnel.
The classifications continue downward to capture lesser impacts, but the administrative implications remain severe.
Right. A Class C mishap involves costs between $60,000 and $600,000, or a non-fatal injury resulting in 1 or more days away from work.
And finally, a Class D mishap covers costs between $25,000 and $60,000, or a recordable injury not otherwise classified.
The system is meticulously engineered to assign a dollar value or a bodily metric to every single unplanned event.
Every single one.
But why does the text prioritize these specific financial thresholds? I mean, why does a $2.5 million mistake trigger a Class A classification?
The text states that safety investigations are for mishap prevention purposes only, not for punitive actions or establishing financial liability.
Okay, that's what it says on paper.
However, the clinical reality is that these classifications, particularly Class A and B, trigger massive, highly scrutinized investigative apparatuses.
Because of the loss of capability.
Exactly. A Class A mishap means a system has fundamentally failed, resulting in the loss of a multi-million-dollar asset or a human life.
The $2.5 million threshold for Class A, or the $600,000 threshold for Class B, exists because those financial losses represent a measurable degradation of combat capability.
The Air Force cannot project power if it is destroying its own aircraft or permanently disabling its own personnel through internal negligence.
To manage this massive investigative apparatus, the text details the Air Force Safety Center, located at Kirtland Air Force Base.
We must understand the architecture of this center.
The doctrine meticulously lists the specialized divisions required to oversee this prevention program.
Let's break down the divisions.
The Analysis and Cyberspace Operations Division sustains the Air Force Safety Automated System, which is the primary database for collecting and analyzing all mishap data across the force.
Data collection.
The Aviation Safety Division oversees the highly complex aviation mishap investigative process. The Occupational Safety Division manages industrial, sports, and traffic safety, serving as the primary liaison for OSHA standards.
While all of those divisions are critical, as a TSGT, you must focus intently on the Human Performance Division.
Why is that one so critical?
The text explicitly identifies human error as the #1 cause of Air and Space Forces mishaps.
Let that sink in for a second.
Not mechanical failure, not enemy action, human error.
So what does the Human Performance Division do?
This division utilizes experts from medicine, physiology, psychology, and aircraft maintenance to analyze exactly how human behavior contributes to mishap risks.
What kind of behaviors?
They're looking at fatigue, complacency. Cognitive overload is a huge factor here. The system structurally recognizes that the most volatile, unpredictable variable in operational safety is the human being operating the equipment.
The remaining divisions complete the bureaucratic architecture of the Safety Center. The Weapons Safety Division oversees policy for nuclear, conventional, and directed energy weapons. The Training and Force Development Division delivers safety education to commanders and safety professionals.
Educating the force.
The Personnel and Resource Division handles the internal budgeting and manpower for the center. The Office of the Staff Judge Advocate provides legal advice and, crucially, controls privileged safety information to protect the integrity of the investigations.
Legal protection is vital for honest reporting.
And finally, the Public Affairs Division manages public communication regarding mishap prevention efforts.
Every division exists to analyze the fallout of an unplanned occurrence and inject that data back into the prevention cycle.
We must now examine Section 17C, Preparedness and Protection.
This is a major one.
This is where the doctrine dictates how the installation communicates an imminent threat to the populace. The system relies on a rigid, standardized auditory architecture.
You have to know the sounds.
The text outlines 4 specific warning signals, and you must understand the immediate response required for each.
The first is a 3 to 5 minute steady tone.
A steady tone. This indicates a disaster or incident is imminent or in progress.
The second is a 3 to 5 minute wavering tone.
Wavering. This indicates an attack or hostile act is imminent or in progress.
The required actions for those 2 auditory tones are entirely distinct, and confusing them will expose your personnel to lethal risk.
Let's look at the steady tone first.
For the steady tone, indicating a natural or technological disaster like a tornado or a toxic spill, your directive is to take cover or evacuate to safety.
You are fleeing the environment.
Yes. But for the wavering tone, indicating a hostile kinetic attack like an incoming missile, your directive is to execute security measures and prepare for combat operations.
You hunker down and prepare to fight.
Completely different responses.
The third signal abandons tones entirely. It is the vocal announcement, lockdown, lockdown, lockdown.
This indicates an active shooter incident is in progress.
The directive is to secure your immediate location and restrict all movement.
Lock the doors, stay out of sight.
The final signal is the vocal announcement, shelter in place. We briefly touched on this regarding industrial materials, but the text is highly specific about how this is executed.
Shelter in place is utilized for natural or technological disasters when evacuation is impossible or more dangerous than remaining in place.
Like the toxic plume we discussed.
Right. If a toxic plume is sweeping across the base, running outside will kill you.
So what does the text dictate you must do?
You must take refuge in a pre-designated room. You must immediately shut off the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems.
Shut down the HVAC.
You must cover vents and doors with plastic sheeting and secure them with tape.
You are physically sealing the microenvironment to prevent the external hazard from infiltrating the facility.
You are creating a temporary, isolated atmosphere to survive until the plume dissipates.
To manage the threat of chemical, biological, or radiological contamination during an attack, the system utilizes alarm conditions to dictate the required mission-oriented protective posture.
The MOPP levels.
Right. These alarms correspond directly to the threat timeline.
Let's go through the colors.
Alarm green indicates attack is not probable. Operations dictate MOPP 0 or as directed.
Alarm yellow indicates an attack is probable in less than 30 minutes.
Operations dictate MOPP 2 or as directed, and personnel must protect assets and move to a protective shelter.
Alarm red or alarm blue in certain Pacific installations indicates an air or ground attack is imminent or in progress.
Operations dictate MOPP 4 or as directed, requiring immediate protection with overhead cover.
And finally, alarm black indicates the attack is over, but CBRN contamination or unexploded ordnance hazards are suspected or present.
Operations dictate MOPP 4 or as directed, and personnel must remain under overhead cover until directed otherwise.
As a TSGT, Level B comprehension demands you understand the exact granular configurations of the MOPP levels.
You cannot simply guess what gear your personnel should be wearing.
No. The text outlines 6 distinct postures dictating exactly what is carried versus what is physically worn.
Let's walk through them, because the friction of operating in this gear is immense, which is why the posture escalates sequentially.
In MOPP level ready, you carry your field gear and wear your field gear as directed. You do not carry or wear the chemical overgarment, footwear, mask, or handwear.
You are simply staging the equipment.
In MOPP level 0, the threat has elevated. You now carry the bulky chemical overgarment, but you still wear only your field gear.
Okay, so you've got it with you, but it's not on your body.
Right. In MOPP level 1, a suspected threat is near. You carry the chemical footwear, mask, and handwear, but you now physically wear the field gear and the chemical overgarment.
Let us trace the progression as the threat becomes critical. In MOPP level 2, the attack is probable.
You carry the mask and handwear. You now wear the field gear, the overgarment, and the chemical footwear.
The boots are on.
The boots are on. In MOPP level 3, you are on the brink of exposure. You carry the handwear. You wear the field gear, overgarment, footwear, and you have donned the mask and hood.
Mask is on and sealed.
Finally, in MOPP level 4, the attack is happening or the environment is actively contaminated. You carry nothing. You wear the field gear, overgarment, footwear, mask and hood, and handwear.
Your entire body is sealed within the protective ensemble.
Think about the physical reality of MOPP 4. You are encased in layers of charcoal-lined fabric, thick rubber gloves, and a restrictive mask.
Your peripheral vision is gone.
Your manual dexterity is severely degraded. In a hot climate, heat casualties will begin occurring within hours, if not minutes, under strenuous labor.
Operating in MOPP4 degrades the installation's operational output almost immediately.
Because of that massive operational degradation, the text introduces a vital concept: split MOPP.
Split MOPP.
The doctrine defines split MOPP as a tactic used to divide an installation into 2 or more distinct CBRN zones.
Think of it like a submarine that has taken a torpedo hit.
That's a great analogy.
Right. If one compartment takes on water, you don't flood the whole sub and abandon ship. You seal the blast doors, isolate the flooded compartment, and keep driving the boat forward with the dry sections.
Split MOPP applies that exact logic to a land-based installation.
If one sector of the base, say the fuel storage area, is contaminated by a chemical strike, you do not force the entire installation into MOPP4.
Including the command posts and dining facilities miles away.
Exactly. Zone transition points are established to contain the contamination while allowing the controlled movement of essential supplies and personnel between the hot and cold zones.
This entire tactic is about sustaining the strategic mission.
You cannot efficiently generate combat sorties, load munitions, or repair radar arrays if every single airman on the installation is encased in a level 4 ground crew ensemble when only an isolated corner of the flight line was actually hit.
Split MOPP accepts the reality of localized contamination to preserve overall base lethality.
Moving into the aftermath of an attack, Section 17D addresses crisis response.
The initial chaos must be quantified and reported to the command structures.
Following an attack, the text dictates that all personnel must report observed enemy movement or hazards using the SALUTE method.
SALUTE, S-A-L-U-T-E.
This acronym requires transmitting 6 critical pieces of data. First, the size of the enemy force or hazard.
Second, the activity they are engaged in.
Third, their exact location.
Fourth, unit identification if visible.
Fifth, the time the activity was observed.
And finally, the equipment associated with the threat.
This standardizes the flow of intelligence back to the ECC.
The recovery phase then transitions into complex contamination control and assessment.
The text dictates that control centers will release post-attack reconnaissance, or PAR teams, to collect precise information regarding chemical presence and unexploded ordnance.
For the general base populace not assigned to a PIR team, recovery actions include performing immediate personal decontamination if exposed.
However, the text provides a deeply sobering piece of vagueness regarding this process.
It does. It states, control centers will assess and determine what methods of decontamination, if any, could be reasonably put into action.
I want to highlight that phrase, reasonably put into action.
Why is that so chilling?
Because the doctrine implies that the standard textbook decontamination procedures, running personnel through specialized shower tents with unlimited clean water, may simply not be possible in a post-attack environment.
That phrase accounts for massive resource depletion. If the missile strike that delivered the chemical agent also destroyed the base water mains and incinerated your logistical stockpiles, the control center must dictate improvised survival methods.
The text explicitly notes that reactive skin decontamination lotion and M295 kits are the most effective methods for personal decontamination.
But in their absence, personnel are instructed to contact the CBRN Control Center for improvised guidance.
And the text issues a severe warning here.
Using standard industrial chemicals like chlorine solutions on certain warfare agents can cause violent negative reactions.
If you use the wrong improvised chemical solution on your skin to wash off a blister agent, you will chemically compound the burn.
Improvised decontamination is a desperate, highly dangerous undertaking.
We must conclude the structural breakdown with Section 17F, risk management.
The core of the doctrine.
The entire emergency management doctrine is essentially a localized application of risk management. The system defines risk management as a decision-making process to systematically evaluate possible courses of action, identify risks and benefits, and determine the best course of action for any given situation.
It relies on a rigid five-step process.
Step 1. Identify the hazards. Review current and planned operations to list any conditions that can cause mission degradation, injury, or death.
Step 2. Assess the hazards. Apply quantitative or qualitative measures to determine the probability and severity of the negative effects.
Step 2 requires utilizing a formal risk assessment matrix.
You are weighing the probability of an event occurring against the severity of the outcome if it does occur.
Right. So if a hazard is highly probable to happen and the result is catastrophic loss of life, that matrix yields an extremely high risk level.
Which dictates an immediate halt to operations until mitigated.
Which leads to step 3. Develop controls and make decisions. Select specific strategies that reduce the probability, severity, or exposure to the hazard.
The text mandates a critical hierarchical rule here. Higher risk requires higher decision-level authority.
A TSGT cannot accept an extremely high risk on behalf of the installation. That requires commander-level approval.
Step 4. Implement controls. Develop a strategy identifying who, what, when, where, and the cost associated with deploying the control measure.
Finally, step 5. Supervise and evaluate. Monitor the operation to ensure the controls remain effective and review if the actual costs align with expectations.
The text contrasts two distinct applications of this process: deliberate risk management versus real-time risk management.
Let's be honest, nobody enjoys doing deliberate risk management paperwork.
It involves the full, formal application of the 5 steps, researching historical data, and building complex tracking systems. It is strategic planning.
But real-time risk management occurs when the operation is already underway and conditions suddenly change.
It relies heavily on the operator's immediate situational awareness.
The text breaks this down into 3 cognitive stages: perception of what is happening in the environment, integration of that information with your current goals, and projection of how that hazard will affect the future of the operation.
Now, we must connect the dots. We need to see how these dense regulatory concepts interlock structurally.
The risk management process detailed in Section 17F is the active engine that drives the mishap prevention program detailed back in Section 17E.
The text states that the AF Form 457 USAF Hazard Report must be readily available in all work centers.
Filling out an AF Form 457 feels like feeding the bureaucracy, but here is the reality of why that paperwork exists.
When you utilize the AF Form 457 to report a frayed cable on a crane or a suspected exposure to hazardous materials, you are actively executing step 1 of the risk management process, identifying hazards.
You are feeding critical data into the Air Force Safety Automated System so the safety hierarchy at Kirtland Air Force Base can execute steps 2 through 5.
You are the sensor detecting the flaw before it becomes a Class A mishap.
Let us trace the complete anatomy of an incident to observe the full operational relationship of every chapter we've discussed.
A full scenario.
Imagine an observer on the perimeter fence sees a hostile armed force approaching the gate, accompanied by a drone releasing an unknown aerosol.
The observer immediately generates a salute report, transmitting the size, activity, location, unit, time, and equipment, fulfilling the directive in 17D.
They transmit this data to the Emergency Communications Center, the 247 central nervous system defined in 17A.
The ECC instantly processes this data, dispatches security forces as first responders, and informs the command post.
The command post then triggers the 3 to 5 minute wavering tone across the base, fulfilling the warning signal requirements of 17C.
Hearing the wavering tone, the base transitions to alarm red.
Because an aerosol release is observed, the commander dictates MOPP Level 4. All personnel immediately don their full protective ensemble overgarment, mask, hood, footwear, and gloves.
The kinetic attack concludes, and the hostile force is repelled, but the aerosol remains. The base shifts to alarm black.
The EOC, operating as the tactical support node, directs the specialized PAR teams, functioning as emergency responders, to begin post-attack reconnaissance to identify the aerosol.
Simultaneously, the Crisis Action Team, the top echelon of installation leadership, analyzes the casualty reports routed through the EOC.
The CIT does not manage the chemical containment on the perimeter. They are analyzing whether the remaining uncontaminated flight line can still launch interceptor aircraft.
Every gear in the bureaucratic machine turns in exact sequence.
The ultimate consequence of failing to achieve Level B comprehension occurs when these interlocking systems are fed incorrect data or decisions by an operational leader.
Let us return to the requirement to accurately interpret and classify hazards.
If that unknown aerosol is released on your installation and you, as a leader, fail to correctly classify it as a toxic industrial material rather than a standard chemical warfare agent, you will initiate a catastrophic chain of events
This is the lethal reality of operational ignorance.
because you didn't construct the right meaning.
If you misclassify a TIM as a chemical agent, you will likely direct your personnel to assume MOPP Level 4, instructing them to don their standard issue protective masks.
As we establish from the explicit text, the military protective mask is not designed to filter toxic industrial materials.
A TIM will present a vapor hazard that aggressively reduces the oxygen concentration in the air.
By ordering MOPP4 instead of immediately ordering an evacuation or a sealed shelter-in-place protocol, you have physically trapped your personnel in a contaminated zone while forcing them to wear equipment that will accelerate their suffocation.
The consequence of failing to classify the hazard correctly is the total failure of the defense system and the mass loss of your personnel.
The key takeaway from this extensive analysis is the absolute necessity of understanding the why behind the regulation, not just remembering the what.
As a TSGT, you are not simply memorizing the gear list for MOPP4 to pass an inspection.
You must understand why alarm black triggers distinct, staggered release procedures.
The text defines initial release for CBRN and specialized teams like EOD, limited release for PR teams, and damage assessment, and general release for mission-essential personnel only.
The system parses out the release to preserve the base's combat capability.
You send the explosive ordnance disposal teams out during the initial release because they possess the specialized training to mitigate the unexploded bombs littering the taxiways.
You hold the general population back in their shelters to prevent mass casualties from secondary hazards, like localized chemical pockets or delayed fuse munitions.
You must understand this sequential release to control your personnel effectively in a chaotic, post-attack environment.
A second key takeaway revolves around the intense accountability aspect of risk management and mishap prevention.
The text explicitly mandates that all individuals hold a vital role in preventing mishaps.
It states a fundamental rule. A failure to intervene when a potential unsafe act is identified is a failure to protect.
The doctrine defines your inaction as a structural failure.
It is not a passive error. It is an active, undeniable failure to protect Department of Defense personnel and property.
The entire mishap prevention program relies on the individual enforcing the standard at the lowest operational level.
If you see an airman violating a safety protocol on a multi-million-dollar airframe and you do not intervene because you don't want to cause friction, you own the resulting class of mishap when that aircraft crashes.
The system holds you accountable for what you tolerate.
Finally, you must thoroughly understand the command structure relationships.
The incident commander is the tactical authority physically fighting the fire.
The Emergency Operations Center is the logistical hub coordinating the specialized support and resources required by the incident commander.
The crisis action team is the strategic brain ensuring the installation's overall mission continues despite the fire.
They operate in parallel, supporting each other, not in sequential command over the localized incident.
To conclude this analysis of your operational mandate, we must examine a final clinical reflection derived strictly from the real-time risk management text in Section 17F.
The text details the knock-it-off and timeout concepts.
These are verbal alerts used during an ongoing operation to instantly inform others of a developing hazardous situation or a loss of situational awareness.
The text states unequivocally that all airmen and guardians, regardless of rank, position, or operational tempo, are empowered to use these terms to halt an operation without any fear of administrative repercussions.
The ultimate failsafe built into this massive, rigid military bureaucracy is the absolute authority granted to the individual operator.
The text explicitly states that when a timeout or knock-it-off is called, the halt is non-negotiable and cannot be overridden by command authority.
Consider the gravity of a structural system so acutely aware of the fatal consequences of human error that it grants every single airman the legal power to instantaneously strip command authority in the name of safety.
The complex regulations, the multi-million-dollar EOCs, the layered protective postures, they are all ultimately subordinate to the individual, recognizing that a catastrophic failure is imminent.
You are the final control measure in the doctrine. Proceed accordingly.